much on your mind when I interviewed you in Johnstown a couple of years ago, and that's the war in Iraq, and your personal change of heart about that war in Iraq. Many people seem to think that things are going much better now in Iraq. Do you?
Well, it's certainly militarily, there's less incidents. The problem I've seen is political decisions that have to be made by the Iraqis themselves. They don't want us there. They want us out of there. I want us out of there. I think we've done everything we could do militarily. Incidents have decreased, but still the problem politically still faces the fact that they can't solve the problem, the political guidelines that we set up. I think they have 17 guidelines, and they've solved 4 or 5 of them. So there's a long ways to go. They want us out. That's the key, and we want out. We have depleted the resources of our military in the United States since we've been in Iraq. We need to rehabilitate them. We're spending $343 million a day, and 68% of the people say we want out of Iraq. So we need to do it responsibly and carefully, but we need to get out of there.
But did President Bush's surge policy work?
Well, I think for the short term, it certainly reduced incidents. I'm not sure whether it's because of the Iraqis were just worn out, but certainly the way they're doing it today makes a big difference. It used to be we broke down doors, we went in and we killed people inadvertently. Now they're much more careful about that. They're doing it the way you should fight a guerrilla war. That makes a big difference, and I think the change in tactics is as important as the numbers of troops that are over there. But what this has done is constrain us from putting troops into Afghanistan, which is starting to go bad. So we got some real big problems facing us. The next president's going to have some real decisions he's going to have to make.
Well, you led into the next country I wanted to ask you about, which of course is Afghanistan. As much as Iraq seems to be a little more stable these days, Afghanistan seems to be falling apart.
Yeah, I think we have to worry about Afghanistan. The production of poppies is up. And of course, those drugs go to almost all of Europe. We do have more Europeans, but there's so many caveats with the European commanders. They have to call back to their country before they can react militarily. It's not going better. It's certainly incidents have increased, not at the level Iraq was at one time, but about the level Iraq is today. So we're looking at putting more troops in Iraq. That's initially where we went, and that's where we should have stayed. We made a real mistake going into Iraq in the first place, in my estimation. But at any rate, we've got to start to reduce the troops in Iraq and concentrate on Afghanistan.
Do you believe we need more troops in Afghanistan?
I think we have to be careful even there. We have to make sure that the government does what it's supposed to do. The Iraqis have to do what their job is, and the Afghans have to take over themselves. We can only do so much, or we're going to be there forever. And I'm saying we're teaching them how to fight like we do, and then they wouldn't have the equipment or the resources to do it. So we need to make sure that they're the ones making the decisions, not us.
Are you aware of any renewed efforts to go after Osama bin Laden during these last months of the Bush presidency?
Well, I think there's a continual effort, and I don't think there's anything that I know that would make it any easier. But they certainly want to get bin Laden if they can. None of us know if he's even still alive. But the problem is that Pakistan border and the fact that they come back and forth all the time. And it's so remote, it's almost impossible to get in there. So as much as we'd like to get him, it's very difficult. And, of course, he's learned not to make any communications at all where we can pick him up and go after him.
I want to ask you a little bit of presidential politics. And, of course, this sort of leads into questions regarding comments made by General Wesley Clark. Yeah. You, of course, were the first Vietnam veteran to serve in the U.S. Congress, and you have a distinguished war record of your own. General Clark seemed to suggest the other day that the fact that Senator John McCain was shot out of the skies in Vietnam was not in and of itself a qualification to be president. Where do you come down on this whole controversy?
Well, I think what he meant was just being in the military doesn't necessarily make you qualified to be president. But that experience of being in the military is very important in my estimation to get an overall idea of how to handle things. I think his years in the Senate certainly helps him. But also you have to realize that he's got the Bush aura on his agenda. In other words, everything that Bush did, he agrees with. He's changed his mind a number of times. I think you've got to look at his policies rather than certainly part of it. He's a military hero. I'm a great admirer of John McCain's military history, but I disagree with him policy-wise about the way he would run things. If he's going to run it just like Bush did, we don't need another president, eight more years of Bush.
Do you think that Senator Barack Obama is capable of being commander-in-chief? You, after all, did support Senator Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Do you think Barack Obama can be commander-in-chief?
Well, I'll tell you this, he's a very charismatic guy. He reaches out. He ran a marvelous campaign. You don't have to be in the military in order to be the commander-in-chief. You have to listen to your military. For instance, one of the best foreign policy presidents we had was George Bush, who had been in the military.
The first one.
The first Bush, yes, that's right. Good correction. And he let the military run it. He let Cheney run the Defense Department. He let Colin Powell run the military. That's what you need. But you also need advisors that know how far you can go. We made a terrible mistake when we went into Iraq. We didn't have good intelligence. We went in with inadequately prepared to take over, let them take over. So you need advisors, a vice president, for instance, that has experience and can give him advice. He needs a secretary of state, a secretary of defense. They make the decision, and I think he's made some good decisions. I'm impressed by the way he reaches out to people. He came over to see me not long ago, and we talked a few minutes when I was on the floor of the House. He has the capability, he has the charisma, and he wants to. The country wants to change the direction. That's his biggest benefit. So he just needs some experience around him to help him make these decisions.
So the lack of military experience, direct military experience, in your view, does not prevent him from being a good commander-in-chief?
No, I think, for instance, you take President Clinton. He had no military experience at all, and but he asked for advice from me and from a lot of other people who were knowledgeable about the military. For instance, the budgets, he would always have his chief of staff call and say, how much do you really think is needed? And so it's a matter of who you talk to and who gives you advice, who you have confidence in. And I think he'll be fine. I don't have any question in my mind that military experience is an important element, but who you have around you advising you is just as important.
And there's no doubt in your mind you're supporting Barack Obama over John McCain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to do everything I can to help him. And I'm also talk to him about how we get out of Iraq, how we portray ourselves. We need to restore the credibility of this great country. We're at 9% in Turkey. Our credibility is the lowest level it's been in years. So that's the first thing he needs to do. We need to work with multinationals, other countries. We can't do this ourselves. I kept saying this over and over again. We need to internationalize this effort in Iraq. President Bush didn't think that was needed. He did this without these other countries. And I think Barack Obama understands he's willing to work with other people. Certainly the way he reached out in his campaign impressed me.
Is he taking your advice?
Well, I think I see that he's starting to listen to people like myself who I think know. He was against the war before I was. He wouldn't have voted for it. He came out against it early on. But I think the way you get out is so important, and where you put your resources in. You have to look beyond Iraq. That's what I'm trying to tell him, and I think he will. I think he'll take my advice along with a lot of other people who have experience in the Congress and otherwise.
I want to turn to domestic politics.